have already talked about this in some of my previous recordings, and I decided to put some more thoughts into determining what to skip if even just a small portion of a game or a book or any other media makes me unhappy or causes any form of discomfort now, even though I may have enjoyed it before, if that's a reason for me to not include that into these projects of mine. The perfect example would probably be the Dragon Age series. I enjoyed Origins, I would say, and even the second installment in the series. But then I know that Inquisition happens, and now when I think about the characters from Origins and Dragon Age 2, it's a BioWare game, and there is a hard enough focus on romance for it to be noticeable. And in Origins, there are, for a male character, which I will obviously play in a game like that, there is Morrigan, whom I don't really like as a character now at this point. And then there is Leliana, who's fine, but I know that Inquisition happens. So do I even talk about Origins, even though it's a great game? But there is just this huge aspect that you are in some way expected to interact with, since a big portion of Morrigan's story is directly connected to romancing her. And the same thing applies to the second game as well. Again, it's a BioWare game. The romance occupies a decent chunk of the game, and you are almost expected to interact with it. And now, when I look back at the female options for a male protagonist, I don't like any of them. So, this will be something that I'll have to think about quite hard. One more example would be my rather severe distaste for Yennefer from The Witcher, which will be maybe a bit more complicated considering the fact that I really do want to talk about the Witcher series, the games, because they are one of my favorite uh, games in general. So this one aspect will be quite complicated to approach in a way that will not overstep the boundaries that I have set for myself when I started doing this. And that's directly connected with another thing, which is I would like to avoid giving any sort of conclusions, reviews, or even just my opinions on things, and especially some sort of lectures or even lessons. For example, one of my biggest passions and something I really love doing is working out and training. But on the internet, there are so many people that should never ever give any sort of advice regarding working out, exercising in general, and dieting. And I really don't want to join the ranks of those people. So I'll have to be very careful with that. Not really just because of my sense of responsibility, but it might also lead quite fast into some sort of a spiral of negativity which goes directly against the reason why I created this channel in the first place and started recording myself. I consume more than enough of that by myself, and I definitely don't need to add on top of that what's already there. But enough of that. Asterix at the Olympic Games is another volume of Asterix comics, one that did receive a movie adaptation, which I haven't seen, but nevertheless, it begins with a soldier in one of the camps telling the others that one of their own, of a rather great name, Gluteus Maximus, was picked up as the representative of Rome in the next Olympic Games. The Romans were quite happy about it, and our Gauls in the village found out and felt slightly disturbed by it, but nothing major. And meanwhile, the Roman soldier is training around the village at the same time as Asterix and Obelix are going to hunt some boars. Obviously, they are fully doped by the druid potion, so they accidentally interrupt his hard training, and by showing him the disparity between their physical prowess that crushes his self-esteem, which in turn crushes the chances of the camp being celebrated as the one that produced a Olympic champion. So the centurion decides to visit the village of our Gauls on an official business, asking for an audience with the chieftain. Chieftain is currently taking a bath, and a great picture is when his usual carriers, in normal cases, he would be standing on a shield and carried by a number of Gaul warriors, but this time they just load up the entire bath on top of the shield and carry that as to not interrupt the chieftain's yearly scrubbing. And then the centurion asks the chieftain to make sure that the Gauls are not interrupting the training of their champion. Then he attempts to persuade the poor champion to go back to training, who's currently sweeping with a broom the whole camp. Finally, the centurion has some success in telling him that during the Olympic Games there won't be any Gauls doped with the powerful potion, which he somehow accepts, but unfortunately the chieftain of the village came after the village decided to participate in the Olympic Games as well, which prompts the poor soldier to swiftly go back to his new sweeping job. And now in the village, they are trying to pick up a champion that would represent the village. Unfortunately, as they are all on the potion, they are exactly as powerful and as fast as everyone else. In the end, they decide to pick Asterix and Obelix. Asterix for him being smart and cunning, and Obelix because the effect of the potion is permanent on him. The Gauls are quite happy, while the Romans are quite grief-stricken, and now even the centurion joined the Gluteus Maximus in sweeping with a broom, while Obelix, as one of the champions, has to make sure that he eats a proper balanced diet, which is a herd of his favorite boars. And finally, they are packing up. Obelix, who is a menhir dealer, packs a menhir, while the soldier in the camp is packing up his favorite broom. The Gauls are traveling by the sea and obviously meet their old pirate friends on their way to Athens. When they arrive, they meet the Roman centurion and Gluteus Maximus, who are left in despair as the Gauls declare that they are going to be the champions. This desperation spreads amongst the Romans and all their representatives. So they decide to just stop training because it's just not worth it, and they just party while the Gauls are enjoying their time, and the Greek athletes are still hard at training, unaware that the Gauls are here with their unfair potion. Meanwhile, the centurion finds out that there is a rule that all artificial stimulants are forbidden and, if found, will be punished by disqualification. When the Gauls find out as well, they decide to just send Asterix in because even Obelix is pretty much permanently on a forbidden stimulant. So finally, when the games begin, it turns out that the Greek athletes are vastly superior to both the Roman soldiers who gave up the training and to even Asterix, who just isn't in the form needed to compete in the Olympics without a potion, and that leads to a crushing victory of the Greek athletes. The upper echelons of the Athens decide to put out a race only for the Romans, which is the Roman soldiers and Asterix, because if they haven't won even a single discipline, it might turn out that no one would be interested in the games anymore. So when that is announced, Asterix, Obelix, and Panoramix cook up a scheme, make the other Roman soldiers dope on the potion, while Asterix will compete fairly. The Roman soldiers all arrive at the finish line at the exactly same time and then are accused of cheating by Asterix, and that is later on proven by the druid Panoramix that he added a special ingredient to the normal potion that makes them invincible, that made their tongues purple, and thus Asterix is the only competitor who finished the race fairly and is awarded a palm of victory. When they return to the village and there is the usual dinner, Panoramix realizes that Asterix gave up his trophy to someone, and it turns out that the soldier Gluteus Maximus got it from him and was promoted by Caesar, who was quite pleased that the Romans were able to win at least something, and got promoted to a centurion, while the previous centurion was promoted as well. And that is the end of the Asterix at the Olympic Games volume.